Well, hello, everybody. The tragic death of George Floyd at the hands of police has caused people to come out of their homes and go into the streets in every neighborhood, city, suburb, and township, not just in America, but all around the world. Hello, everybody. My name is Mason, and thank you and welcome. This is Solutions, Not Slogans. The Beasley Media Zoom room is where you are all in right now. Over the next hour, our illustrious panel of radio, TV, political, and law enforcement agencies, along with your calls, will seek solutions for the Metro Detroit area. So this will be a fun hour, and we've got some great guests and panelists for you. So let's get started. We'll start with Angie Star, on-air personality for 105.9 KISS FM here, who tirelessly, with all of the energy she had to make this happen for everybody. Hello, Angie.
How you doing, Mason?
Next is the zany morning star who gets you to work from 105.1, The Bounce. It's Gello. Gello, hello.
I mean, zany? Do I get the title of zany? I'll take it.
That's you. Yeah, he's zany, all right. The award-winning on-air Praise Network programmer, Randi Myles, has joined us and will be a part of this today, too. Randi, good evening.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm excited about what's about to happen.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. The highly rated morning television star anchor of WDIV Channel 4 here in Detroit, Evron Cassimy, now joins the panel as well. Evron, thank you.
Of course. Glad to be here. Thank you guys for setting this up.
Beasley Media account executive and longtime community activist with youth mentorism is Brian Berry. And Brian, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Detroit. I'm ready for this conversation. I'm so excited.
Detroit Councilwoman is with us, who is also Council President Pro Tem of District 5, Mary Sheffield. Ms. Sheffield, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Thank you all for having me.
The Washtenaw County Sheriff Jerry Clayton. You'll hear some exciting things from him as well. And JC, thank you, sir, and welcome to the panel today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you including Washtenaw County in this conversation.
And representing the Detroit Police Department, Deputy Chief Marlon Wilson, who is going to let us know some things that are happening in Detroit as well that maybe we hadn't heard yet. Marlon, thank you for joining the panel today.
All right, thank you as well, and thank you for the invitation.
The newly elected mayor of Inkster is Patrick Wimberly. Patrick, who has been a boots on the ground fighter for that area for so long, now has the mayor's chair. Patrick, welcome.
Thank you so much, Mason, for having me, and thank you, Angie, for inviting me.
The director of the workforce training of Integrated Health, Detroit Wayne, will be Andrea Smith. Thank you for being a part of this, Andrea.
Thank you.
All right, we'll start with Angie Star and get this going now that you've met everybody. And for all of the callers that we will use tonight, we thank you as well for being a part of this. So Angie Star, we'll start with you.
All right, first I want to inform our viewing audience. We had the opportunity to ask our listeners solutions to bridge the gap between the community and the police. So these are solutions and ideas from our listeners. So we're going to start with our first solution. Let's run that audio.
Hi, my name is Amy, and I have a solution to this an epidemic we're having in the United States. I found this app on my iPhone where you just say, "Hey Siri, I'm getting stopped," and it starts recording your traffic stop. I believe all cars should have cameras in them to record our traffic stop. So therefore, it protects us as a citizen and protects the police as a police department. I believe this will help with the police brutality and citizens on a whole.
All right, just to recap, she feels that citizens should have video cameras inside and outside their vehicles that will record interactions with police during traffic stops. I'm going to go to Sheriff Jerry Clayton. How do you feel about that?
So I don't have a problem with that. You know, if all police agencies had the money, I think they should all have in-car video. They should have body cams. And as a citizen of the country, I think I have the right to record that interaction as well. I like the fact that she said that it's an iPhone app that you can ask Siri to start the recording, because we're always going to be concerned. I just having this conversation with my 20-year-old son, and my wife and I, we were talking about can he record? And my response is, I don't want him messing around with the phone while the police officer has stopped him and he's making all sorts of gestures and the police officer doesn't know what he's doing. So if you can do it just verbally and start that recording, I don't see a problem with it. And the only other thing I'll say to it is, you know, sometimes these videos go viral and they show one segment and it starts people's perspective. It's good to have the entire perspective. So if you have the police version and the citizens version, I think it's a good start to telling the full story.
All right, thank you. How about Deputy Chief Marlon Wilson? How do you feel?
You know, I'm in agreement with Sheriff Clayton. I don't really see anything wrong with it. It doesn't pose a concern for the officer or the citizen, right? We were one of the first departments nationally to have full integration with our body-worn cameras in in-car videos. So that has been a mandate for a while through Chief Craig. So I'm in agreement as well.
Yeah, being stopped in Detroit, I was probably more fascinated with the officer having a body cam than I was with the ticket. I said, go ahead and do the ticket, but tell me how the camera works. So yeah, Detroit was one of those forerunners.
All right, would any of our other panelists like to comment?
What about you, Gello?
You know, speaking about the app that allows you to just use your voice to say, hey, Siri, I'm being pulled over. That's a shortcuts app, and you actually have it on your phone now. It's automatically downloaded when you get a new iPhone, where you can just go into the app and say, hey, Siri, I'm being pulled over, and she'll begin to record any audio or any video. And for me, I mean, I'm constantly pulled over. I would say in a year time span, I've probably been pulled over 7 or 8 different times. So to have the ability to say, hey, Siri, I'm being pulled over, to record everything that's happening and not have to reach for anything, I think that's a fantastic idea.
All right, Evrod Casimir.
It's not a bad idea, and it's definitely something that I think could be integrated. However, that wouldn't have benefited Breonna Taylor. That wouldn't have benefited George Floyd, because he was there barely able to say that he couldn't breathe. And in this day and age, there's cameras everywhere. Everybody has access to a phone. And when it comes to things that happen outside of a traffic stop, everybody has their phone out. So we're now just putting more cameras everywhere. Now we have different angles of these instances that are happening. So is that going to stop the issue? We'll see.
Yeah. Angie Star?
All right.
If I can chime in real quick, I just want to say I agree with Evrod on that. I think the idea of solutions for what we're talking about has to be a culture shift in the way in which policing is happening in this country. And I appreciate the solution. I think that's one way to shed light on what's happening within police departments around the country, but it doesn't address the root cause. And so not only I think is it important that we continue to record interactions as we go through this dynamics of trying to change the culture, but I think it's important that if you also see an interaction that may not look appropriate, that you also record it, because that helped in the situation with George Floyd and a lot of the other situations that we're seeing, is that it was actually witnesses who put out their phone and actually recorded those interactions that help shed light into some of the injustices that we're seeing. And so I just want to say I agree with Evrod and to the caller. I think that's one way that we can get to bringing things to the forefront, but we have to deep now into the deeper root cause issues of the culture of policing in our country.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mary. Angie Star, you got a continuing question?
Yes, I do. Let's run that audio. My next question.
Yes, I would like to know, is there a way to have a community Sunday which involves the police and the community to interact with each other, which could take place in like one of the city parks, and games can be played while the police interact with the children and the people of the community to find out some resolutions to end the fear of how we feel when we see police officers and how they treat us when they see us. And we would also like to see the Blue Pigs come back, because they used to be jamming in different places in the schools. Thank you.
All right, to recap, how can neighborhood parks be used for positive citizen interaction with the police? And can we please bring back the Blue Pigs, that police band that used to do a lot of schools?
Whoa.
I remember them. They came to my school back in the day. Can we bring them back to help entertain the community? I'm going to go to Mary Sheffield first.
All right, so I have to commend our Detroit Police Department for what we call neighborhood policing, and I think it's an initiative that we really have to commend. We have NPOs in every single district throughout the city of Detroit, and I actually personally have been to several events where they actually hosted in our neighborhood parks conversations, events where the community and police department is trying to build that relationship. And so can we have more of those? I think we can, but I do want to take a moment and commend our Detroit Police Department for their efforts thus far on trying to build that relationship with community. I know at one point in time, the chief of police even was having like conversations with people moving around the city with the community at one point in time to create a space where it's not just this adversarial arrest and lock up, scenario, but we're actually having dialogue outside of that particular environment. And so we have a long way to go, but I think the neighborhood police model is a great model that we have in Detroit that we can build upon to continue to have that relationship with community. And I also think it's important that we bring back or try to put more money into the youth academy for our young people so that they're more exposed to what Detroit police officers actually do and have a greater respect and appreciation for the work of officers as well too.
All right, Deputy Chief Wilson.
I'm in agreement. When I ran the 8th precinct, one of the initiatives we had was bridging the gap, right? So we would utilize the local parks to host different type of events where we would bring out bouncies. I think it's important to have that interaction, not at, say, a crime scene or when I'm making an arrest. Have that interaction when it's a neutral, calm environment, right? And there was even times where we would even have movies put up in the park, and it really did a great job with bridging the gap between us and the community.
All right, okay. I'm going to move to my next question.
Hi, my name is Dorothea, and we always talk about customer service. I think maybe if we were to have the open line of communication when you stop by a police officer, whether it's just a random stop, why not tell the person who you stop, hey, I stopped you because your lights on the passenger side is out, instead of I need to see your license, insurance, and registration in the car. Don't let that be the first statement that you make to a person. Just a suggestion. Thank you. Bye.
All right, quick recap. Can a non-intimidating script be written for police interaction with the citizens? I'm going to go with Sheriff Jerry Clayton.
Yeah, so you can write the script. I mean, we actually have it in our policy where our staff's required to introduce themselves with their name, tell the reason for the stop. We follow the procedural justice lead model. So not only do I tell you, I listen to you and give you an opportunity to explain, and it's how I interact with you. Even with that said, we're not going to be able to get the intimidation out of that contact. I believe probably my law enforcement colleagues would agree with me. When those lights come behind you and a police officer comes up to you, that's just an intimidating situation. And people ask why. It's because we're the only civilian profession that is allowed to do the decisions that we make, right? We are allowed to use force and coercion to achieve our objectives. And more importantly, our decisions and our actions impact what we value most, our life, our freedom, and our liberty. So just by that alone, it's an intimidating situation. But I believe wholeheartedly, we can have not just a script, and I think Councilwoman Sheffield talked about it, but the culture in the organization where you understand you are a service provider. And everyone you come in contact with, even if you're making an arrest, is a receiver of that service. And it's how you treat people with dignity and respect that really goes a long way. So if that's the normal pattern, then we start to see a shift from an intimidating relationship to one of mutual respect. And that's where I think we should be trying to head.
All right.
From I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Chief Marlon Wilson.
Once again, I echo what was said by my counterparts, right? It has to become your core philosophy. When the chief came in, that's what he was all about: transparency, accountability, and non-biased policing. And that has to be part of your organization. If it's not, you can write a million scripts. it won't come off
All right, we're having a little trouble there.
genuine. So it has to be part of the organization from the top down, and that's how you become effective. It has to become part of your organization.
Evrod.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that it can be intimidating. I definitely can. But a lot of times when you are stopped, they do tell you this is what you were pulled over for, and you're allowed to respond to them in that nature. But yeah, as you mentioned, it would definitely have to be a full organizational cooperation.
All right, Mayor Patrick Wimberly.
Yeah, I just echo basically what everybody said. I think it's the culture mainly. Customer service is, our duty. I'm not a sworn officer, but as the mayor of the city of Inkster, I duly have power to oversee the police. And the main thing that I tell my officers all the time is you get more with sugar than you get with salt. Mm-hmm. So as we take our approach as we're being police and just how you approach it, I understand that you're reacting in time. So just to hear the sheriff talk about the different policies that are out there, I know that we're doing a good job at doing that, but just approaching the situation with more sugar than salt, I think you'll get a better reaction from people.
Andrea Smith.
Yeah, I have to agree with what everyone has already stated. As long as it's a humanizing interaction, I feel like it's fine to have that script. But just remember that the officer is doing their job. And so if you maintain respect, they should do so in return.
All right.
All right, very good. And thank you, Angie Star, for your line of questioning. Now we move to the Bounce 105.1, the morning superstar, Gello. Gello.
How you doing? Thank you, Mason. Let's go ahead and play one of our callers from 105.1 The Bounce, please.
This is Baba Shamari, a.k.a. Roland Matthews. My solution is that police should follow the slogan, protect and serve, rather than stop and frisk and all the other slogans that have been negative in terms of how they communicate with the community.
Now, let me just restate that question. So police should start protecting and serving instead of stop and frisk. Can the police stop treating citizens like criminals until proven guilty? I'll go to Sheriff Jerry Clayton, please.
Yeah, so I think this goes back to, and I think it's been mentioned a couple times, so I'll just take the opportunity to speak to this culture piece. So CEO Mark Fields of Ford said a long time ago that culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so you better pay attention to it. You must invest, and I think the deputy chief talked about, it starts at the top. So it's the leader's responsibility to clearly articulate what the beliefs are in that organization. Those beliefs drive the values, and it's the values that drive the behavior of the staff. And you have to reinforce that on a continual basis. You can't just do it once. It's a continual effort. So it's that shift in culture and changing basic assumptions about who we are, what our purpose is, which is to serve, and that we co-produce public safety with the community. So think about this. If I have a mindset that I co-produce public safety, when I come in contact with a community member, I treat them like a partner, not like a criminal. I still can maintain my safety, all the things that police officers have to keep in mind, but it's not I gotta be safe or I gotta treat people equitably. I can do both at the same time, and that's what makes us more effective. So in answering the question, yes, we have to shift our focus to servers of people. And how we build those strongest sustainable communities is by co-producing public safety. We do that in partnership with people we serve, and we can only do that when there's trust and mutual respect between the groups.
Agreed. Thank you, Sheriff Clayton. Let's go with Mayor of Inkster, Patrick Wimberly. What do you think?
Well, listen, just let me just come behind the sheriff every time, because I'm just going to say amen. I truly agree with that sentiment. Again, as the leader of the community, it's important for me to not only for the police, but for everybody to let them know that we're here to serve, and we're here to, in the police capacity, to protect. So I definitely echo everything that he said. I think that if we truly get that culture into people, right from the beginning, as we talk about the youth academies, and my partner over in Detroit, the Councilwoman, talked about the youth academy and getting the youth academy back. I think that's important as we start to teach our folks as they're young coming into the academy, and then going into the professional field, what we expect right from the beginning. I think that's important.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Wimberly. Brian Berry, what do you think, man?
Well, actually, I'm glad you called on me. I was able to witness a great training today. It's called CIT, Crisis Intervention Training. It was held in conjunction with the Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network. And you had officers from different agencies role-playing different situations that they may come in contact with in the community. And it was critiqued by other officers so that you can, one, everyone that's involved, the officers, the community, the situation is quelled, everyone goes home safe. I was just blown away. I think that's a model that all officers in all communities in our area, especially urban areas here in the FAR, should participate in. I also think I actually had that sentiment supported by an officer, a lone-tall officer that was there, that crisis intervention training should be taken to the community. Let's get in the trenches. Let's go to community centers like Northwest Activity Center or the Inkster Community Center, and let's teach folks how that dance should go. If you're interacting with law enforcement, here's how these are what our protocols are. Officers have protocols, and here's how here's what the community's rights are, so that we know how that nuance should be. And then you should take it a step further and go into the high school and do it year after year, so there becomes a trust and understanding, and so that folks know that if an officer is posturing a certain way or doing a certain thing, it's not because it's not because they're are just overly aggressive and they have a chip on their shoulder. They're following their protocols to the T. That's what they have to do. And here are your rights as a citizen. So know that, so we'll know what's going on. I think that's one of the ways you can probably just debunk this fear, this stigma, this resentment, this anxiety that goes on both sides of the coin, from the citizen to the officer.
Brian Berry, thank you. Do we have any other responses from any other panelists?
I'd like to say something. We heard somebody mention that it starts from the top down, and I just want to get somebody's response to this, because over in Shelby Township, the police chief there made anti-protest tweets. This is the police chief, and was suspended for 30 days after he apologized. That's the headline on clickondetroit.com. He's keeping his job. What do you think about it?
Sheriff Clayton?
I think that there's an accountability there. So the question becomes, can that person lead? Can that person lead that organization any longer in a way that's fair and equitable to everyone involved? And what we forget is, so they may say, well, the folks in Shelby Township thinks he can, but those police officers are going to have contact with people from Detroit and people from elsewhere. And how can anyone that drives through Shelby Township have any trust in the police department when the leader of the organization has made those kind of tweets? So obviously it's up to the leadership, the elected leadership in Shelby Township, to make that decision. But I would just say, I would think that person, that chief, is compromised, and it's really, really hard for him to model the kind of behavior that we would expect from the Shelby Township Police Department. I think it's going to be extremely difficult for him to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheriff Clayton. Anyone else from the panel like to respond to Everett's question? Okay, so let's move on with another one of our Bounce listeners. Can we play that audio, please?
Hi, this is Clarence Strong from Detroit, the West Side. I have no idea. And when the police when they get the police, I know everybody takes a psychological test. Maybe one way they can do it is have it set up where they can tell which police officers are race, ask them different.
Okay, so let me basically restate what that the caller was saying. Can a program be set up to evaluate the mental health of police officers? And I'm going to start with Andrea Smith, Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network. Andrea?
Sure. So as the caller stated, there are already fitness tests that the officer goes through, but I think interim exams are a good idea. However, that would not be favorable unless you debunk that stigma or begin to attack that first, because you'll have officers who are afraid of risking their jobs if it comes up that they have depression or anxiety or post-traumatic stress disorder. So it could become a liability. So there's a lot of work that would need to be done prior to that happening.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. Deputy Chief Marlon Wilson, what do you think?
I think mental health, obviously, and physical health, in conjunction with each other is very important as an officer. I think we do a great job on the front end, right? Taking people through a battery of tests, psychological tests. They take a written test. But what happens after you get on the job and you might, see trauma throughout the years? That's why our chief has done a great job of instituting programs. We have 2 programs specifically dealing with mental health: DPD Fit and peer support. Peer support is a non-biased way for officers to self-report mental health issues, as well as for other officers to report health issues as well.
Thank you, Chief Marlon. Evrod, I know you had a response to this earlier.
Are we acting as if mental health is the reason that George Floyd is dead? Is that caller insinuating that that's the reason that Breonna Taylor is dead or Trayvon Martin? I mean, we have to get to the core of racism that is hidden in a person's heart under the guise of law enforcement.
I agree with you, Everett. Also, I want to add to that with Andrea, what she said. There's so much stigma with the fact that you may be battling some form of mental illness. With that in mind, as a police officer, will people feel that will diminish what you can provide to your city? So I think that there has to be a solution to be able to mesh those together so that there's not a stigma. But on the other side, to your point, Everett, I do believe that the people who murdered George Floyd and Aubrey, they don't have it. Well, they weren't police, but they don't have anything. They have the racist element to it. That is not a mental illness. That is an illness that is taught from where they grew up.
And to add to that, and not to make mental health seem like it is not a serious issue, but there are prescriptions that people take for depression, for other types of anxiety. There's no pill or prescription for racism.
Yeah. Chief Marlon, maybe you can help clarify this for me. So just like with training, police officers go through training. Is it mandatory maybe every six months or to a year where they have to be reevaluated, mentally reevaluated? Do they do that with police officers, or just like you have to, after 5 years, renew your driver's license? I think being a police officer and going through the things that you go through and seeing the things that you see, it's going to affect you mentally in a negative way. So are they being reevaluated every 6 months to a year? Does that happen?
So what we have is a biannual training that happens every 6 months. And part of that training is certain topics like cultural diversity, mental health awareness. So we do talk about it every 6 months, but is there like a formalized evaluation for mental health? No.
Do you think that would help?
Yes, I do. Because like you said, you might not want to self-report it, and you might not even know that you're going through a mental health crisis, but to have that evaluation, that can assist in you identifying it as an issue.
If I can just add really quick, back to kind of Everett's point about, what happened in the cases of George Floyd. If we had officers that, number one, reflected and looked like the community in which they served, I think that plays a tremendous role in some of the police and community encounters. That's number one. If we had more African-American officers who are from that community, who know the community in which they're serving, I think that also plays a huge role. You may have not seen what we saw with George Floyd had that been an African-American officer who had responded to that scene and dealt with George Floyd. And so I just think it's important as we talk about, what's needed, not only is mental health, but I think implicit bias training is important. Cultural sensitivity, as you mentioned, that needs to be ongoing. But we also need to keep pushing. I believe in residency. I believe in making sure that the demographics actually reflect the cities in which officers are patrolling and representing. And so I know in Detroit, we are doing a decent job, but I think it's important that we have as many African-American officers that are patrolling that African-American city. that is extremely important for young Black men to see that in the police force as well too. And I think that will reduce some of what we've been seeing as relates to some of the racial biases within the police department.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. Let's move on to our next caller from 105 on the bounce, please.
My name is Donald. I have a solution that might help. One of the main people who know bad are their coworkers. That's bad reported. Put some self-addressed postcards in the police department. Put them in the break area, put them in the bathroom. Do not have to put their name down, say who it is. They can just put down who's problem person, and they can set up a committee, the mayor, chief of police, and someone from the city council. And they could investigate that person. If you put them in all the precincts, just put a self-addressed postcard, and they don't have to put their name on there. Like I say, put it in the break area of the police officer's break area, or the bathroom, and see what happens. We might find a few bad police officers where their coworkers will tell them, because I wouldn't want to work with a bad coworker. So, hey, it might help.
I believe personally this is one of the best solutions I think I've ever heard, because I know that it's hard for police officers to out their own. It's a brotherhood. They have to stick together, and I understand that aspect. But the question is, can a system be created where the police can secretly report bad cops? And I'm going to go with Chief Barren. I don't want to mispronounce your name because it's Elvin Barren. Chief Barren.
He had another engagement, so he's not.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just go with Sheriff Clayton.
So, yeah, I mean, you could have this system where police can secretly report on bad cops, but I fundamentally disagree with the fact that you'd have to do that. So I just had a virtual staff meeting with my staff. We were having this in this space of all the criticism that police are getting. And we just had this situation where somebody put out a false blog about, because the community pushed back against us, we had them evicted, which first off, we can't have them evicted, and we didn't have anything to do with it. But so they're all freaking out, right? So all the staff is freaking out. So we had this agency-wide meeting, and we were talking about, so I get this question, well, Sheriff, will you back me up? Do you got our back? And I said, I got your back, and I'm going to get to our point here to the question. I got your back. You don't have to worry about that. If you are following policy, if you're following the law, and your actions are consistent with the values of our organization, I got you. I got you even if you made an honest mistake. You're going to have to be held accountable for it. And if we're not going to exit you out the organization, I got you. Here's what I don't have your back. If you as an adult intentionally violate the law, intentionally violate our policy, or intentionally go against what we value, then I don't have your back. So I said that to our staff. And here's the last thing I said to them. And you shouldn't have the back of a partner that's right next to you that violates the law or policy that puts you at risk. It shouldn't take me to be secret to say what you did. It is incumbent, if I have 400 people in an organization and one person does something that they shouldn't do, that puts the other 399 at risk. So why should we have to do it from a secret standpoint? If we are the professionals we say we are, we swear that oath when we become police officers, then let's live up to the oath. And when people are doing things they're not supposed to do, have the intestinal fortitude and the courage to out it. The fact that we'd have to do it in secret, that undermines the model. I mean, not the model, the what we swore to when we became police officers. I think that's damaging.
Well said. I didn't really think of it that way, but it sets the tone. You are right. It potentially could be damaging. Let me also ask Chief Marlon Wilson, what do you think about this?
I'm in total agreement with Sheriff Clayton. If it has to get to the point where I have to secretly report misconduct on behalf of an officer, well, then you don't need to wear that badge, right? Since I came on the job, I've been on the job 25 years. Since I've been 18, 19 years old, I have always been taught you have a duty to report misconduct. I don't care how small it is. So I echo that. If you got to report it in secrecy, really, you don't have a spot on my department.
Chief Wilson, thank you. Does anyone else?
Yeah, I do. It's Randi. My biggest issue with this after listening is the people who are repeatedly troublemakers on the force, as in the one that killed George Floyd. We hear that he had a history of this kind of behavior on the force. How do you stop that from being recycled? And also, how do you stop an officer who would leave like Highland Park and go to Inkster?
Chef Clayton?
Chef Clayton, yeah.
Yeah, let me jump in on this one because so two things. No disrespect to the elected folks that are on this call, because I'm elected as well. But let's not get it twisted. We have a lot of elected folks now in this space tripping over themselves to get to the mic to talk about reform and all this other stuff. These things happen where police officers repeatedly violate the rules and keep their jobs, or repeatedly violate the rules and go somewhere else. It's because of collective bargaining agreements. Oftentimes collective bargaining agreements that aren't made by the chief of police, it's by elected appointed officials who sit down with labor. So they say, well, instead of giving you a 5% raise, I'll give you a 2% raise, and I'll agree to this stipulation that we'll take stuff out of your file after 2 years. That's not the chief doing that, but it handcuffs the chief. And now that person may get fired or leave, and they go somewhere else. And then when I come to do their background investigation, all that discipline's gone. So it's not just, it's everybody has to be, understand that they're culpable for this. So I agree with the Congressional Black Caucus and the Justice and Policing Act that wants to have a national registry for misconduct for police officers. I think that that's important, but it still won't stop the removal from people's personnel files if we keep agreeing to it in the collective bargaining agreement. So we need to be aware of that.
Chef Clayton.
Good.
All right.
All right, Randy Myles. Thank you, Gello.
All right. Thanks, Mason. So,
and by the way, we're getting short on time.
Okay.
We're about just about 20 minutes out, and we'll go with Randy and then Evrod.
Okay. All right. So let's play praise listener question or solution.
Hi, this is Clarence Strong from Detroit, the West Side. I think that it would be a great idea. I mean, at least for now anyway, because like Mason says, and like I don't do anything wrong, but when I see the police, I get nervous. And I just be panicked. And I think it's because I have a fear now that when the police catch me, I might not make it home the same day. So I think it would probably be helpful if the police wasn't allowed to arrest anybody. Like take their name down, their cameras work, take a video or put it in their write-offs or whatever that you did, but they just shouldn't be allowed to arrest you, just give you a ticket. And then, that way everybody's sure to go home the same day. Hopefully it'll stop the deaths of, young black men and women, getting killed.
I think we will go to Mayor Patrick Wimberly from Inkster. Why can't police not arrest citizens for a traffic stop and just only give out tickets?
Well, let me say again, number one, that I'm not the police, and I wish that the sheriff would have took this question first and I could have just said amen. So let me be clear that I support the police 100%. I believe that, again, if they're held accountable and they're being responsible to the policies that's set forth, and also they're serving and protecting the community, they have the right to arrest you. That's their job. They're the professionals. And I support that 100%, keeping it short.
All right. Deputy Chief Wilson?
I can speak for Detroit. Most of our encounters with traffic stops really do end in just a citation being issued. Whether it's somebody running a red light, we don't have the authority based on that violation to make an arrest. But there are times when we do have a duty to uphold the law. So say you do a traffic stop and somebody's wanted for a violent felony. Well, that officer has a duty and responsibility to make that arrest. But everything has to be constitutional and fair.
All right. So let's, does anybody else have a comment or quick comment? Okay. So let's go to the next caller, please.
Solution for America today is the fact that the National Guards were trained only for weekend purposes and reserve. Let them be active in America, working with the police locally as well as the state police, as they do naturally. My name is Kevin Harris. I'm an National Guardsman for Detroit East 8 Miles Light Guard Armory. I mentioned this to them a long time ago that we need to be present in the cities. The people would be a lot safer, and they felt a lot safer, but they told me that it would cause mass panic.
Sheriff Clayton, what do you think about the National Guard helping the police in the community?
I'll be really, really brief. I do not agree with that idea. They have a different role, different purpose. You hire police to do things in terms of keeping people safe. I mean, there's this whole movement about demilitarizing the police. Bringing in the National Guard really runs in the face of that.
Yeah. What about you, Mary Sheffield? You have any comments on that one?
He took the words, Sheriff Clayton took the words right out my mouth. I was just, thinking the history, 1967 riots with the National Guards here in Detroit. I think there's already fear and tension, and the money that we would have to use to really fund the militarization of the police force coming here, training them for domestic mobilization. That money can be used towards root causes of crime and violence in our community. So I don't support the National Guard. I think we need to get back to what we mentioned earlier, community policing, protecting and serving, and using money elsewhere, shifting that to providing more social services in our community, not more policing and militarization of policing in our city and really in our country.
Yeah, I grew up in a place near a National Guard base, and it was intimidating just to see them doing their maneuvers and things. I can't even see how that would go together personally. All right, so let's get to the last question that I have from my listener.
Hello, my name is Brian Hagerman, and I'm from Royal Oak Township and off of 8 Mile area, particularly between Livernois and Wyoming area. And I think what needs to be done is we need more community recreation centers, more trade, more reach out programs to help our Black youth. For one, that'll help them enable themselves to feel better and get a job. We don't have any recreation out here, no more recreation, no more public swimming per communities like we used to when we were growing up. So that leaves a big void. You're just leaving guys to listen to rap music, get the wrong influence, watch other cats sell drugs and make donuts in the street. And then they want to do that. And we all know what that culture brings on, the problems that we have right now with the police today, because they get tired of making runs and doing all this in the community. So once it's a conflict, it turns into chaos real quick. So I think that would be my solution. It's not so much as defund the police, but build better programs for Black men and Black and brown and everybody. Build more programs to make everyone feel better about themselves within their own communities. Have a good day.
Well, what about that? Recreation centers, well, of course, after COVID, or even on the outdoors. What do you think about reopening so that the community can be more involved in that, especially the youth? I'll toss that to my coworker, Brian Berry, first.
Okay, thank you. I think he hit on a point there, and I know there are stats out there. I know the Children's Defense Fund has those stats, and I'm pretty sure the law enforcement, of course, have those stats. When after-school programming was cut drastically, you started seeing more interaction, more young people, especially Black and brown men, being now names are funneled through the system. So he hits on something that's very. He hit on the vein. We do need to find money. Councilperson Sheffield, we need to find money for after school programming. When I came up, kids were involved in PAL. You have AAU and all the stuff now, but everybody can't play AAU. There were PAL leagues all over the place. And that's how you earn your stripes, playing in the police athletic league. And it wasn't just about who. You have football, you have baseball. Now we need to have programming that focus on the 7 tenets of learning. You have auditory learners, you have visual learners, you have interpersonal folks you just put a book in front of and they blossom. You have kinesthetic learners who are actually who like to play sport. So if we found funding, we can find funding to do everything else. We're building up a whole new justice systems, and we're building up jails. We're tearing down jails and building new jails. Let's find money to keep people out of those jails. Let's find money to to curtail things when they're 13, 14. So when they turn 23, 33, they're not another name, they're not another number. You know, we are productive. Like, nobody comes into this world bad. You know, we just have bad stimulus and we act off those bad stimulus. You know, let's put more positive stimulus in the community. Like, it seems pretty simple. You know, like, let's find the money to do that. Let's not find money to be punitive to folks.
I see, Mary Sheffield, you're shaking your head in affirmation. You want to join us on that one?
Definitely. I mean, I keep going back to, you know, I don't think you can surveillance or police yourself out of some of the issues that we're facing. You have to deal with the root causes of what breeds crime in our community. And I think it is a lack of mental health resources, jobs, economic opportunities, recreation. All of it plays into the social services that communities need. And one of the things about the defund the police kind of movement is really, how do we reimagine like what policing is in our communities, and how can we start to invest in communities that have not seen the investment that they need? And so you said find the money is there. It's about how are we prioritizing the money, right? Because the city has a nice amount of money, and I think local municipalities around this country have decent budgets. It's about how are you prioritizing our funds. And so I think it's a good time in this country to really have some serious conversations about what we value as a country. And it shouldn't just all be geared and shifted towards public safety and policing, or as a part of public safety, rebuilding our communities as well too, community patrolling, investing in neighborhood organizations that are doing great work right now. It doesn't have to always be a lockup and arrest approach. And so I completely agree with you. Recreation centers play a huge role in that. I know it was a report that came out that I think they said it was like $294 million police department's budget versus $10 million for the health department. You know, and to have that huge disparity in how much we're spending in policing versus social services in our communities is something that we must address. So I completely agree. And I think that would help really reduce the crime and really invest in people, not necessarily in just the public safety aspect of it.
Any other comments?
No, we're just going to move on time.
Okay.
Thank you, Randy. Very good. All right. The morning anchor superstar, lead anchor, WDIV Channel 4, Everett.
All right, let's get to our WDIV caller. Let's listen to what they have to say.
My name is Lily Jones. I truly believe that if the police officers were police officers of that community, of that block, of that neighborhood, they know more about the neighborhood, they know more about the people in the neighborhood. It will be better if the police officers were people of the neighborhood. I truly believe that if you live in that neighborhood, that should be the neighborhood you patrol, because you know those people better than anyone. And I think that is one way, just one way to fix it, to at least begin to fix it, because they are human just like we are human, and we have to relate to them like they relate to us, and they put their lives in danger for us, and we put their lives in danger because we scared them, and they put our lives in danger because we scared them. So it's like, it's a win-win but a lose-lose situation, and I feel that communities are built up of people, and if they live in that community, I'm quite sure they are familiar with the neighborhood watch, with the people who walk up the street, with the people who attend the store, with the people who play lottery, etc. And this could be a way to fix it. Once again, my name is Lily Jones.
Very good question there. So let's get on over. I want to start with Sheriff Jerry Clayton on this one.
So I'll be brief because I know we're running out of time. I think the concept makes sense. I think agencies should be diverse because you bring in diverse perspectives. And if I work with you, I know you better. The concept of if I live in that community, work in that community, come from that community, I should have a greater commitment to that community. I think in theory and concept, that all makes perfect sense. But let's not forget the other piece, because I've seen it. If the culture of the organization is bad, if it is rotten, then those police officers, regardless of where they live, will assimilate into that bad culture, will assume the same bad basic assumptions and lack of values, and they will behave in a very similar way. So yes, I think the concept around police working where they live is a good one, and I think there's some positive aspects of it, but we still got to focus on internally on the culture of the organization.
Okay, let me get to Marlon Wilson. How does this play an effect, or does it play an effect on racial profiling?
So I think it's kind of like what Sheriff Clayton said. Racial profiling only can exist, or bias-based policing can only exist in an organization if the culture is bad. So once again, we get back to that. You have to be fair, hold your people accountable, because if that culture is not rich in strong values, you're going to see bias-based policing. So I think it starts with the organization. Hopefully I answered your question, but I truly believe it starts with the organizational culture of the department.
Okay.
To eradicate, racial profiling.
All right. Thank you very much. Anybody else have anything to add to that? All right, let's get to our next Local 4 caller.
Okay, my name is Rob. I'm calling to make a suggestion. Don't know if it'll help, but I think it could. If, in fact, every police car, especially in an inner city where it's predominantly black, there should never be a car where there's 2 white officers alone or 2 black officers alone. There should always be multiracial officers in those cars so that no one race will be able to ride around all day with some negative conversation about the area they patrol.
Is that feasible? Let's get to Sheriff Jerry Clayton for this one.
First off, no, I don't think it's feasible. Is there some value to it? Again, I'll go back. If I got a diverse organization, we learn from each other. Maybe we distill myths. But I'm sure a lot of my colleagues, and it doesn't even have to be in the policing profession. I'm sure we've all seen this, where people that have bias may be friends with someone that doesn't look like them, and they see that person as the exception to the rule, not the rule. So just because I work with somebody that looks different from me doesn't mean that I'm not influenced by bias and I'm not racist. I'll just say, you're the good African-American that I know, or you're the good Latino male or female that I know. So that's not a solution.
I see some of our panelists shaking their heads in agreement. Randi, Myles, Angie Star, and if you want to add anything to that as well.
Well, I just feel like we are made up of so many different people. I don't think that, just by putting someone of a different color, different race in a car with you is going to change the culture of, who is in that community and who is going to be more intimidated than another person. I've been intimidated by a black cop pulling me over. So it doesn't really matter to me who's sitting in the other seat.
Angie, did you want to add anything to that either?
I mean, I really agree with what Randi just said. A bad cop is a bad cop, black or white. It's something that's inside of you. So we have to, again, kind of like what Mary said, go to that root cause that makes them a bad cop and then get rid of the bad cops.
Okay. Let's get to our next Local 4 caller.
Okay, Angie, this is Anthony from Southfield. Part of the solution is people talk about, community policing. I think that part of that community policing should involve external affairs, not internal affairs, but external affairs, meaning to have police officers in specific communities, or the internal affairs unit be placed in specific communities and not at the precinct or not at the police headquarters, but internal affairs be placed in the community with not just ex-police officers or police officers with 30 years experience, but also with people from the community participating in that. So there'll be some oversight, making sure that citizens' complaints get back, to rightful people. So that is part of my solution, to create an external affairs office to investigate police misconduct.
Very good question. I want to go to Councilwoman Sheffield for this one. Let's start there. Do you have any comments on that?
Sorry about that. Not really. I would really give that towards one of the police officers on moving that into the community. I always want to highlight, though, what I think a lot of residents are not aware of, and that is the Board of Police Commissioners, which is an oversight body that oversees the Detroit Police Department. And I always just want people to know about that commission, because I think it's important that as we talk about police reform, as we talk about policies that can be implemented in ideas and strategies like people are presenting today, that is an independent body that oversees and sets policy for the police department. And so I think it's a powerful body that a lot of residents don't even know about. They don't attend meetings or anything. And so if we can have more engagement at that level, I believe we can see some true changes in some of the policies that are put forth here in the city of Detroit. So I couldn't really speak to whether or not that's a good idea. I think when the officers probably can go in more detail, but I do think that all of the callers who have solutions and suggestions, a lot of this is going to stem and come from policy changes that are going to need to take place here in the city of Detroit. And that happens really at the Board of Police Commissioner level. So I just want to make sure I pointed that out.
All right, well, let's get to one of our law enforcement, either sheriff, deputy chief, if you want to jump in on this one.
So I'll jump in. So I could speak for the Detroit Police Department or the city of Detroit. We, Councilwoman
we may have
Sheffield is correct. We do have an external department, which is the Board of Police Commissioners. And we do have an investigative entity attached. They are totally separated from the department, and they are housed in the neighborhood, in the community.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you very much for that. Before we run out of time, Mason, I want to send it back to you.
Thank you, Ron. Very good. WDIV, thanks for joining us. Thank you all for joining us today. We have just a couple minutes, 30 seconds. Just give me a quick closing thought. And we'll start with you, Ron.
I do want to tip my hat to the Detroit Police Department. From their neighborhood policing to their neighborhood night out, the Detroit Police Department, in my opinion, does a very good job in making sure that they are involved in the community. I have a story that airs tomorrow that involves 2 Detroit police officers that started a nonprofit that takes kids off the streets and teaches them hip hop dance in a dance studio for free, and also mentors them. And this is something that these officers are doing on their own free time. I've also highlighted the mentoring that the officers do in school and outside of school. I wish that a lot of other departments had that same type of desire.
All right, Andrea Smith.
Yes, so I would just like to echo what Efrod said. I think Detroit police do a very good job. And if we can just focus on community resiliency as a whole, I think we can move forward.
Before I get to Brian, Sheriff,
Yes.
you designed an 8-part plan. I think it was an 8-part plan. Can you just go through some of that really quick for us? Which is, this plan is to what, rehabilitate your department, or?
No. I think what you're talking about is 8 Can't Wait, which came from Campaign Zero. That was really around use of force. A lot of the basic things around use of force. Duty to intervene. A lot of things that a lot of progressive police agencies already have. That I'm pretty confident that DPD already has. It's really around use of force. How do you mean? De-escalation, duty to intervene, duty to report. All the things that we know, if you have the right policy supported by the right culture, that you reduce the possibility of interactions between police and our community members ending in someone getting hurt. So when that was brought to us, we responded to them that we've had this in place for almost 3 to 4 years, that our policy is revamped every year. And I'll just say this about our policy. Not only do we hold our staff to the letter of the law, the Supreme Court has a number of cases that frame use of force, but we also have a higher standard. So you can be right. We've seen this, where officers have been within the law, but ethically it's been wrong. In our agency, you have to be within the law, and it has to be ethically right. And I think that's a higher standard that we should all try to achieve.
Very good. Brian Berry.
I'm glad we did this call. I hope our words and this synergy manifest into something real that we can measure, we can see growth from. And I believe we should have crisis intervention training for all, for more officers, for cadets, for the community, and for students.
Councilwoman Sheffield.
Thank you. I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to be on the call and for having this conversation. I think it's extremely important. And for the callers that called in with solutions, and really residents throughout the entire city, I just want to encourage you to continue to use your voice. during these trying times. I think sometimes people underestimate the power of people and the solutions and the voice that normal residents have. And so I would encourage people again to utilize those various elected bodies to voice your concerns as we continue to shape policy around police reform. I also wanted to mention the 8 Can't Wait initiative. It looks like Detroit has 4 of the 8 recommendations already in place. My earring fell out there. 4 of the 8 recommendations already in place. So we do have some room for some improvement. And Detroit, I do want to commend Detroit Police Department. We've done an amazing job with community police relations, but I also think that, you know, nothing is perfect and we always can have, make room for some improvement. So thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Chief Wilson.
I just want to close by, thanking you for this opportunity. I think we need to have more conversation, more forums like this to raise awareness and just to kind of, get information out to the community. And it's good for me as a law enforcement officer to hear some of the solutions and concerns for the community. So I just want to close by saying thank you.
To Gello, Randi, Myles, Angie Star, on behalf of Beasley Media, which is, of course, our Praise Network, Bounce 105.1 and KISS. We want to thank you all as well for your participation. And thank you, Detroit, for your involvement as well. Evrod Cassimy, thank you as well from WDIV Channel 4. And Detroit, good night now.